But get with her and you'll see where it's formulated.
You never know.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. The Information Technology and General Services Committee will now come to order. Councilmember Zine is here to speak on item number 9. We'll go to that item first. You ready to speak on that item, Mr. Zine?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman and Councilmember Parks. I had an opportunity to go to the radio shop to have a police radio repaired, and when I was there, I noticed a large number of fire vehicles, brand new, and police vehicles that were sitting idle collecting dust. And IT is responsible for communications equipment in our emergency vehicles and maintaining technology when it comes to the internet, etc. I started asking while I was there, why are these vehicles, brand new vehicles, sitting idle? What is the problem? We don't have anyone to install the equipment. We have equipment to install so they can go out in the field, command vehicles for the fire department, the police department, and police vehicles, brand new, sitting there without personnel. So I met with the representatives there at the radio shop. What is the problem? The problem is there's no funding to hire the personnel to install this radio equipment and the equipment in the fire vehicles that are used in emergencies in the city of Los Angeles. So I came back and met with my policy director, Chris Olson, said, you need to go over there and find out what the problem is, and he did. And from that point, we wrote the motion stating at that particular time, as of February 25th, there were 34 out-of-service LAPD patrol cars parked on the roof, and a number of fire vehicles that were needed for the emergency services in the city of Los Angeles that were not able to be deployed because they don't have the equipment for communication in those vehicles. So the concern I have is that somehow that particular section of information technology be provided the financial capability of completing this task, because it seems senseless to purchase new equipment for the fire department and the police department and have it sit idle because no one can install the equipment that's necessary for them to perform their duties. We have representatives here from the radio shop that can give some further explanation and further detail, but I hope this committee will see that the importance, and Councilmember Parks knows the police department pressed for equipment, and my particular observation of it, if we don't have the equipment to deploy, it sits there doing no one any service at all.
Dennis, let me ask.
Yes.
Are you saying that there is not enough equipment, or that there's equipment and there's not people to install it?
They have the equipment and no one to install.
Okay.
So they purchased the vehicles, fire vehicles, police vehicles, the equipment is there, brand new police and fire equipment, vehicles, etc. And they have the radio equipment to install, but they don't have anyone to install that equipment. That's the problem. So if, Mr. Chair, if I can have the folks from IT come forward and give further explanation on this concern.
Would that be Peter Benjamins and Thomas May?
That's them. Thank you. And they didn't bring this to my attention. I inquired when I saw all these idle vehicles what was going on. They weren't saying, Councilman, something's wrong. I went and inquired, and so I want to make sure that someone doesn't criticize them for complaining to a councilman. I saw there was a need and a necessity and brought it up to them. Thank you.
Go ahead. State your name for the record. Don't be shy. Somebody go first.
My name is Peter Benjamins. I'm a senior communication electrician supervisor.
I'm Thomas May. I'm the supervisor of the mobile install section for ITA.
Okay.
Both of you ITA?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to explain to this committee whatever it is you think is pertinent regarding this situation?
Initially, the situation that Councilman Zine observed was at a time when the funding that we draw from to pay for the hiring hall employees that install this equipment, they're not city employees, they're hiring hall people, they're funded from a special fund. And at that time, we were given instruction that that fund was almost depleted and that we should stop work on any non-reimbursable installations because of this. And the decision was made at that time so that we didn't deplete the fund completely, because it has ramifications if you do, to send all the employees home for one day so that we could see if anything could be addressed. And that was the particular day that Councilman Zine came into Piper Tech and observed there was nobody there on installs. On further clarification of what was going on, not only do we have fire vehicles that were pending installation, although they have all the equipment, the fire department makes sure that we have all the equipment. We have a large number of police vehicles that were pending installation that did not have equipment, and that is another issue, but I don't know if that's part of this committee's purview to look at that, but that is another big problem.
Anything else?
Okay. Basically, we use the hiring hall. They're not permanent employees, as a way to cut costs. And at the beginning of the year, we're given a certain amount. It's about $144,000 with the number of hiring hall communication electricians. That's good for about 2.5 pay periods. So within the 2.5 pay periods, we have to bill. Funds have to be transferred. This has to be approved by the CAO's office, the mayor's office, and the council before these funds get transferred. But these are also the funds that we use for the installation of the police vehicles. So typically around the January timeframe, this fund has been decreased to about half, all depending on the load. So the amount of time we have to get these funds reimbursed gets shorter and shorter. So typically around this time, we end up running low on funds. And this particular time, we also found out that work we had performed to the tune of about $300,000 was being held up somewhere in the process, and this added to the problem. Now, for your information, typically annually we do about $800,000 to as much as could be $1.5 million worth of hiring hall labor in the installation of police and fire and some other departments as well.
Okay.
Just a
Status
point of
right now.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, a point of clarification. At the time I was there, the fire department did have equipment. I was unaware that the police department did not have the radio equipment to install in the police vehicles.
Now, one of you mentioned, I think it was you, Thomas, you mentioned that something about non-reimbursable installations?
Well, somewhere within ITA, I assume that they consider various departments as being reimbursable for the labor that we expend in installing the equipment. And I also assume that the police department, as they put money in up front, are not considered reimbursable. They consider as already having put the money up front. But the problem is, it's all one pot. It all gets pulled, money gets pulled from that one account. There's no discrimination made between the two. So as we're not reimbursed as we go through the year, or if it takes longer to get reimbursement, we get closer and closer to a zero amount. The money that's put in up front to fund 4 people gets depleted very quickly. And so that's where the problem arises when we have no money in that account. And it takes time for various processes to occur. And I think it's quite inefficient also. It seems that we're trying to be reimbursed for several $1,000s, we'll say, for an install for general services, and many thousands of dollars from the fire department. It all takes the same route and the same time and costs the same amount of money to the city. It seems to be quite inefficient and wasteful. And it causes a problem when we have no money left in the account.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Ito with ITA, and we really appreciate the council member bringing this situation to light. As the gentlemen have described, ITA starts our our year with a budget of about $275,000 in our hiring hall account. About half of that is for alarm maintenance and installation, and the other half is for police department hiring hall work, primarily radio installation. That isn't sufficient for the work, nor is it sufficient for us to cash flow the work we do for the fire department. What happened this year, and the mysterious $300,000 number that Peter mentioned, was the reimbursement we had requested from the fire department for pay periods 3 through 13. So 11 pay periods, we had to cash flow the work that was done for the fire department, pending their review of our invoices and approval of those, and then putting the transfer of money back to ITA into an FSR. So that was why the department was short of cash. It was really a cash flow issue. To mitigate that, ITA has had to transfer $450,000 from our other accounts, our operating accounts, into that hiring hall account to try to cash flow us in order to make payroll for that period. What the CAO is working with us and what the fire department is cooperating on is for next year to give us the appropriation for the fire department work. So we're not dependent on reimbursements, but we'll have an upfront appropriation, which we will have to then prove up through invoices and our time charges. So we hope that that will remedy the problem.
Let me ask you, what's the source of revenue for the fire department to reimburse you? Is that grants, or is that part of their budget?
Most of that is MICLA money.
Okay, but I mean, maybe we should ask, is the CAO here?
Jacob Wexler with the CAO's office.
Kind of explain to us, is that on the reimbursements of fire department, if it's MICLA, would they have it in their budget, or is that something that is dispersed outside of their budget?
It's in the fire department budget, the MICLA, well, it's in MICLA, it's in the MICLA budget, but it's appropriated, or the authorities for the fire department to spend that money.
Okay.
So the issue is that periodically we have been transferring the authority to spend the money from fire to ITA, and that process requires us to go through the FSR, the financial status report process, and get authority from council on those transfers. So what Laura brought up is that if we transfer that authority sort of in the beginning of the year, then get the authority from council to have ITA spend that money, and then throughout the year, as the invoices come in, we can get the MICLA money given directly over to ITA to reimburse them more quickly.
You're not delayed by saying you have to wait for FSR. We've done motions in the process or in the interim of FSR to move money. So
Correct.
if you're not obligated to wait for that period if there's work not being done, particularly if the money's there.
Yeah, I think that if I'm not mistaken, the funds, they sent I don't believe that we ever actually ran out of funds for this. I think that during it was running low and there was a concern, and they wanted to figure out exactly what was going on, so they, as a precautionary action, they took the action to send the people home in that time period. But we actually were able to get the funds there in time for the FSR, through the FSR in time for them to do the work. But because of there's certain more uncertainty, there's sort of this delay, you have bigger amounts of funds that are being waited for. I think it's just it causes a little bit more strain
So
on
you said we're putting the money in the fire department's budget, and it's up to them to reimburse ITA?
Well, we move the money from, the MICLA money is spent by ITA, but it's in the fire appropriation within ITA, within MICLA, excuse me.
Yeah, so it's in MICLA,
Yeah,
earmarked for fire.
earmarked, correct, yeah.
Okay. But the thing is that to move that money, it doesn't go through the fire department, it merely goes from MICLA to ITA.
Correct.
Okay, so now
The
what's...
fire has to sign off on that.
They have to sign off on the
On the invoice.
amount of work that's done.
And they would still, in the process that we're discussing, they would still sign off an invoice to confirm that that work was done. And the CEO would still look at it to make sure that the invoices make sense. But
But it seems like it's a mechanical thing as opposed to a lack of funds. It's a matter of fire department saying, we need 13 cars fixed, and MICLA moving the money so ITA can do the work.
Right. And we're hoping that if we do the authority up front, then the mechanics can happen more quickly, every 2 weeks, every month, instead of...
How do we
just
solve
sort
it
of-
for this rest of this fiscal year?
The transfer has gone through, and I'm not aware of any, is there a shortage, Laura? Do you think there's going to be a shortage for the rest of the year?
No, I think we'll be all right for the
Okay,
rest of the year.
So we're good.
Now, are we okay for both the police and fire, or is it, because
Yes.
somebody mentioned earlier, is the police without equipment and without personnel, and the fire has equipment and no personnel? I mean, that's unclear. Is the MICLA to buy the equipment and for the personnel to install it?
For fire, it's all MICLA. For police, it's just directly out of the general fund because the vehicles are not MICLA funded. So we have position authorities that are general funded in ITA's budget, two bodies that do these installs, and the hiring hall money that was identified. The equipment money we're going to have to look into for our report back. I wasn't aware that was a problem.
Mr. Chair, there's currently 35 black and whites that do not have the equipment. 35 black and whites, brand new, are sitting on the roof. There's no equipment to install. The fire department equipment, I understand, has been taken care of. They're now out in the field. So as of now, there's 35 black and whites sitting there with no equipment, waiting for the equipment to be purchased, and then the install.
And you're saying that MICLA doesn't pay the police department equipment?
I wouldn't think that, I'll have to look into that for the report back. That was more of that issue.
Okay, could you find out
Yeah.
what account pays for the police equipment? And if the fire equipment is there, what account pays for the personnel resources for both? And give us some timeline of when both issues can get resolved?
Yes. Oh, timeline now, we'll get the report out.
Yeah, we need a time, but we need it quickly. I mean, 'cause-
Yeah. Well, I was going to make
Yeah.
some report backs in 30 days.
yeah.
Because they've opened, as you know, 2 new police stations, Topanga and Olympic, and that requires additional vehicles. And there's 35 vehicles that need to be deployed, that aren't deployed, to cover those particular stations. So what they're doing is basically using spares to accommodate that purpose.
Yes.
If I may, I'm Troy Hart, Commanding Officer of Emergency Command Control Communication Systems Division at the Los Angeles Police Department. It's our responsibility in my division to make sure that the equipment is available to Motor Transport Division and also to ITA for installation in those vehicles. The equipment I'm talking about are the laptops that we use for our mobile digital computers. Currently, there are about 34, 35 vehicles sitting waiting for installation there, but it's not because of lack of equipment. What is going on at this point in time is that these vehicles are the replacement for salvage vehicles. Those salvage vehicles are in the process of being salvaged. When they're salvaged, Motor Transport Division removes the old equipment from those vehicles, refurbishes the equipment, and then reinstalls it in the new vehicles. Currently, they're in the process of removing the equipment, refurbishing it, and they will put it into those vehicles. What you'll find is, as they go through this process, there will always be some vehicles that are waiting for that equipment to be refurbished and reinstalled. So it's not a lack of equipment at this point in time.
But there is a timing issue.
There is a timing issue, absolutely.
On the timing issue, is there something that's delaying the timing, or is it just a matter of basically moving the old vehicles out, getting the equipment out, and then reinstalling it? I mean, is there something that can be sped up?
No, there's nothing that's delaying it right now. Basically, it's just that, Councilman, getting the equipment out of the old vehicles, refurbishing the equipment, and getting it installed into the new vehicles.
Here, you can take this one.
Oh, you want, Councilman?
But
Currently, the state of equipment salvage is 2 black and whites that have the equipment that we need to put into vehicles. That means I have 33 cars left that don't have equipment. This is not true that the salvaging is keeping up with the installs. I believe what's happened is that the police department are now installing MDCs and air cards and GPS antennas into the hybrid vehicles and multi-use vehicles, where they were not doing that before. So when we go to salvage their replacement, there was never any laptop, air card, or antenna in that vehicle. So we've basically depleted everything that we have in stock to keep up with installs, and finally, we've basically run out of equipment.
I'm sorry, there's a disagreement at this point, and what we have is somewhat of a lack of communication. Larry?
Yeah, good afternoon. Larry Tagawa, Director of Transportation, Police Department. If I can provide a little clarification. Partly what everyone says is true. Part of the issue, there is no spare equipment. What currently happens now are the vehicles are identified for salvage. They're stripped by ITA, and the communication equipment is then goes through a refurbish process itself. And then when that equipment's ready, they go into the new vehicles. So there's a certain amount of vehicles in a state of flux or a state of being built. We can't build the new vehicles until the old vehicles are stripped. Therefore, there's a certain amount of vehicles always waiting for equipment.
Questions? Okay. At this time, what we're going to do is we're going to continue this motion for 14 days, and we're directing the CAO, the ITA, the LAPD, and LA Fire Department to report back to this committee, again, within 14 days, and include the following information in their report: a complete accounting of all of the LAPD and LA Fire Department vehicles awaiting technology installations, and what remedy they're waiting for in order to get these installations completed, and ITA's current communication services division budget and anticipated fiscal year 9-10 budget and potential shortfalls. In addition to that, the resources necessary to complete the technology work, and also the billing process. So that you're going to brief this committee on all of those things in 14 days. Is there anything keeping you from doing that within 14 days?
Is it possible to get 30 days?
The thing is, we're going to be in the middle of budget very shortly.
Yeah, we're getting crunched by the budget takes over a lot of the energy, both from your departments and every department.
You should be aware, the longer you wait, the more you're apt to get swept.
We'll get together with all the departments.
All right. Thank you. If for any reason there's any delay beyond the 14 days to get the information to this committee, please let my staff know. Okay? All right. So with that, is there anybody else here to speak on item number 9? Item number 9, public comment is closed on item number 9. Okay, we'll move on to item number 1.
Item number 1, CAO report relative to the city's contribution towards the Los Angeles Imagery Acquisition Consortium Data Refresh Project and related matters, formerly council file number 06-0445.
Committee Chair and Member, I'm Alex Yee from the CAO office. The item before you is a request for approval for $457,000 funding for the city to participate in the countywide Los Angeles Region Imagery Acquisition Consortium to refresh the flyover data obtained in 2006. A number of departments use data for maps, plan checks, permits, internet applications, and emergency management. The funding for this project is comprised of a contribution from the DWP and various special funds. The CAO recommends that the council approve the $457,000 funding for this project and the transfer of the funds from the various special funds to ITA to pay the consortium for this project. I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and ITA is also here to answer any questions the committee has.
Yeah. Let me just ask, and I think we're on the right track if we're going to all use the same GIS system, but is the only people eligible or available to use it are those that are contributing, or is it a city? Are they contributing and the entire city family can use this system?
This system, the data, I'm not sure I'm not clear on your question, but the
Let me read it again then. Are only the people that are contributing, you listed 4 departments that are going to fund this, can they use it only, or can the entire city family use it?
The entire city family can use it.
And then and do we have sufficient funds to do all this?
Yes.
Is this an annual contribution, or is it a one-time?
This is a one-time refresh project, but I anticipate that we will be doing it every 2 to 3 years to refresh the data.
So the departments would need to come up with an allocation every 2 to 3 years?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody here to speak on item number 1? Public comment period is open on item number 1. Seeing and hearing none, public comment is closed on item number 1. Anything else you'd like to add, gentlemen? No? Okay. With that, we'll approve the CAO report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now move to item number 2.
Item number 2, Department of General Services report and ordinance relative to the proposed sale of 4 surplus city-owned properties at public auction to include parcels of 4607 Oceanfront Walk, 10234 National Boulevard, 735 Battery Street, and 1309 Isabel Street.
Good afternoon. Irene Saltzman, Department of General Services Asset Management. There is an ordinance before you to sell the 4 surplus city-owned properties, and we have a technical correction.
Okay.
The property at 10234 National Boulevard is in Council District 5, not in Council District 11. So if that can be corrected before it goes to council. There are 4 parcels. Oceanfront Walk will go to the Venice Surplus Property Trust Fund, the proceeds. The net proceeds from National Boulevard will go to the general fund. On Battery Street, the proceeds will go into the general fund. And on Isabel Street, the proceeds will be split 50% to the Real Property Trust Fund for CD1 and 50% to the general fund.
Let me ask you, I understand on the Venice property, why are there different allocations for parcel 2, 3, and 4?
Parcel 2 is, that's in CD5.
No, but you said it was going to the general fund.
It's going into the general fund, correct? It's from a fire station.
Okay, it's a fire station.
It's a fire station that's being sold.
So that doesn't go through the 50/50 plan?
No.
Okay, and then what was number 3?
Number 3 is an animal shelter,
Okay.
an old animal shelter, and it'll be going to, 100% of the proceeds will go into the general fund.
Thank you.
Anything?
No.
Okay. Anybody here to speak on item number 2? Public comment is open on item number 2. Seeing and hearing none, public comment is closed on item number 2. With that, this committee will approve the GSD report with the technical change on parcel number 2, which is not in CD 11. It is correctly noted that it is in CD 5. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item's approved. Item number 3.
Item number 3, motion Gruel Parks relative to authorizing the issuance of a right of entry permit or other necessary documentation for the Studio City Beautification Association in connection with the use of city property located at 11200 Ventura Boulevard for the period of March 20th, 2009 through May 31st, 2009.
Okay. Is there anybody here to speak on item number 3? We're currently on item number 3. Public comment is open on item number 3. Seeing and hearing none, public comment is closed on item number 3. Okay. With that, we'll adopt the motion. That item's approved. We now move to item number 4.
Item number 4, motion Parks Weezer relative to authorizing the receipt of Los Angeles Community Redevelopment Agency AB 1290 funds in the amount of $140,000 in connection with the purchase and installation of 10 security cameras at Martin Luther King Jr. Park and Mary McLeod Bethune Library.
Okay. Is there anybody here to speak on public comment on item number 4? We are currently on item number 4. Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 4 is now closed. Any questions? Okay. With that, this committee approves and adopts the motion. That item is approved. Now we move to item number 5.
Item number 5, motion Cardenas Gruel relative to authorizing the transfer of $391,603 from the Los Angeles Department of Transportation to the Department of General Services in connection with the construction of safety improvements for the rail crossing located on Sunland Boulevard at San Fernando Road along the Metrolinx Valley subdivision. This item has also been referred to the Transportation Committee.
Okay. Is there anybody here to speak on item number 5? We're currently on item number 5. Okay.
Good afternoon. Carlos Rios, Department of Transportation. LADOT has been working collaboratively with the Metrolink to implement some safety improvements at San Fernando and Sunland where the railroad crossing is. And what we have before you is a council motion authorizing us to transfer funds over to GSD, who has committed to do the civil work associated with this project, and LADOT would take care of all of the preemption and signal timing work. So what you have before you is a council motion authorizing the transfer of funds to general services.
Okay. Anybody here to speak on item number 5? Public comment is open on item number 5. Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 5 is now closed. With that, we'll adopt the motion. Item's approved. Thank you. Item number 6.
Item number 6, motion, Park Smith Design et al. Relative to naming the new Police Administration Building, Parker Center.
Anybody here from staff on that item? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Assistant Chief Sharon Papa. I would respectfully request that we be allowed to bring this item to the Police Commission. We have not had a discussion of the formal naming of the new Police Administration Building. Early on, we intentionally did not name it Parker Center. There was some debate as to whether the existing building was going to have a effort to save it. We actually were approached by a group that wanted to save Parker Center. We intentionally did not name the building at that point. There have been several informal discussions. Not everyone is in consensus that it should be. Some people think we're moving into the next century. Maybe we should name it something else. But we never got back to a formal recommendation. So I would like the opportunity to bring this to the Police Commission and then bring whatever they recommend back. Obviously, I know the council can certainly act independently, but I would just request that we be allowed to bring this to the next commission meeting next Tuesday.
Well, probably naming of a building that belongs to the police department is probably one of the few things this council has jurisdiction over when it comes to the police department. So, and as far as salvaging the old building, I think that would probably be a crime.
I don't think we disagree with you.
Yeah. So I'm glad we got that out of the way as far as the status of the old building. So being that there is only going to be one building and there won't be two, it's my understanding that the policy of the City of Los Angeles when it comes to buildings and building a brand new one that has already been named, that it's policy of the city, unless we take a different action, that it is assumed, the new building assumes the name of the previous building that it replaced. With that, is there any questions or comments?
Yeah, the thing that I think one of the concerns is that if all of this discussion was going on, it probably should have been brought up a long time ago, because 2 years ago, I know in I think this meeting or another committee, we asked the question of the CAO, who had a committee report that listed the name of the building as public police administration. We said, why do you name it that when it's already named Parker Center? And they said, we never thought of it like that. We're just moving forward on a new building. And we explained to them then and said, well, when we redid West Valley, we didn't say, oh, West Valley, and let's rename it something else. We've moved along historically. And when we go back in our records, after a great deal of consideration, the council back in '67 unanimously said the name of it's Parker Center. So that name stuck with it. And then when I called Bureau of Engineering and saying, why do you keep referring to it as the public administration building? They're saying, we're kind of caught in the middle, because on the one hand, we're hearing people say it may not be, and said, well, did any of them council members, did anybody bring it to a committee to say we need to consider that? And he said, no. So that was the only reason we did the motion, because our assumption, since for the last 3 years of going through this building, that there was never a wavering that the building would be renamed. And so that's why we thought it was interesting when the press picked up and said, we're renaming the building. He said it was named in '67, and we're rebuilding it. And so the issue is what we wanted to facilitate, to make sure that as people are talking about it being open in November, that we not have it open in November and wonder what the name is. So that's why we went and got a motion and said, let's stay with the consistency of what the council did before. And I think if we go back and look in the record, and I think it's kind of outlined in the motion that I gave you, there was considerable discussion as to why that name was picked. And the reason not only was William Parker the guy that people believe put LAPD back on the road from being a non-corrupt department, the impact that he made on the city structure and the charter and the running of the city and all those other things was what was highlighted of his impact on the city of LA. And so the dilemma I have is that I don't know whether we get a chance to decide that part of our history doesn't exist anymore. And so it's a matter of, as our history has been, we have a name, and unless somebody has come forward and said, let's change it. In fact, we had people say, let's go out and do a lottery and pick a name. He said, well, it has one. It's called Parker Center.
And Councilman, you handed me that document, and I do have that. I guess my only point is there probably was a lot of discussion 50-some-odd years ago when that building was named, and I'm just suggesting that we should have a discussion at Police Commission, which are my bosses. I can't sit here and speak for them, but I don't know that there's consensus that as you're moving into the 21st century with a new state-of-the-art building, should it have the same name, should it have another name? I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion, but you handed me that document, and I certainly have looked at it.
What I would suggest is that you go to commission on Tuesday, and we move forward on this, and if they want to come to council, then I think that would be appropriate.
And that's fine. All I'm asking is I would like the opportunity to go to my bosses, which is the Police Commission, and discuss the fact this motion's been introduced. The assumption is by the council, assuming, based on this meeting, the assumption of the council is it's going to be called Parker Center. If we want it called something else or have a different recommendation, we will have the opportunity to come back, and I'll just be able to tell you what that discussion is and what that recommendation is.
But
I'm just not prepared to do that today because I don't know what
I
don't know if there's a debate or not at this point.
yeah, but the thing is, buildings get named, public buildings get named all the time. Every particular public entity, be it a county, a city, an airport, or what have you, they have their own customs and practices. In some cases, sometimes it's more solidified, it's part of their charter, it's part of their DNA as to how formal or informal the naming of buildings are. But when I look at the documentation and the way in which buildings are named in the city of Los Angeles, there's two ways in which we go about giving a facility, not just a building, but a facility, a name. Is that it's my understanding that it is the city council that makes the formal documentation and therefore moves forward the process of official naming. However, prior to that process, the community has in fact brought forth ideas of what we should name a facility and or a building like this, and I would imagine that the Police Commission is not exempt from being one of those entities. So therefore, the way I see it right now, we have a motion made by the council, which is in the purview of the council, and the custom and practice in the city of Los Angeles is for the council to state or restate what the name of a facility is going to be. So as of right now, this particular motion was introduced on March 11th, and we are now almost approaching 30 days later. What I don't understand is why the Police Commission didn't speak of it on their agenda between March 11th and now.
I can't answer that, sir. I can only tell you I will bring it to them at their next meeting.
Okay. So, Mr. Parks, do you have a particular urgency for the council? Should this pass this committee in its current form, do you have any particular urgency that the council hear it in the next
The only
days?
urgency is whether, and I don't know what the timeline from Bureau of Engineering, but they're preparing the building for grand opening, I think, November. And so it's a matter of, you wouldn't want somebody with a crayon to write the name on it. So,
Well, and also, if there's any staff that may want to correct this statement that I'm going to make, but it's my understanding that should we pass this motion and for some reason the Police Commission doesn't have a meeting of which they agendize this particular dialogue about this particular building and the naming of, or a recommendation that they might want to move forward to the council, even if we were to pass this motion to re-solidify that the name shall remain Parker Center, that does not preclude the city council from creating a new motion and renaming the facility under a different name because we have a different purpose or a different agenda that is brought to our attention. So what I'm trying to say is it's my understanding that if something emanates out of the community of the commission, we could still, in May of this year or June of this year, take such an action, and the name will become something else. So what I'm getting at, I don't understand why we would want to slow this motion down if it doesn't preclude any other process to commence and/or replace the process of this motion.
And Councilman, I'm not arguing with process. Because this motion was being heard today, we have not discussed it at commission. I assumed, and maybe the wrong assumption, that you would want to know our position since it is the police department's building. But if that's not the case and you want to go forward, certainly we can come back at another time and just give you our input then. But I just thought it would be nice if we discussed it, you knew what our thoughts were, and then it went forward. But I obviously will take my direction from you at this point.
Well, you certainly very eloquently mentioned something that is just full of a lot of politic in that statement. Because when you say it's a building that belongs to the police department, that's a statement of fact. But when we talk about the document that's before us about when Parker Center was named and this being a replacement thereof, that's a statement of fact as well. As of right now, this motion is only a reinstatement of the fact. It's really not a new process. It's just a clarification. So again, it doesn't preclude the commission or any entity. We could have the wife or a husband of a fallen officer come forward with a petition of 10,000 names today, tomorrow, next week, next month, and say, I think this ought to be named after this individual. So, and this right here, this reinstatement of Parker Center would not preclude us from considering that as well. So I appreciate you coming forward and taking the time to let us know that the Police Commission hasn't gone over or weighed in on how they feel about what name this new facility should have. But with all due respect, it's been staring us in the face for a few years now.
I understand that. The uncertainty in the beginning was whether that building was going to be saved, whether it wasn't going to be saved, and...
You should have asked me. I would have told you what it was going to be. That thing is
We were hoping it wasn't going to be saved, but...
Yeah, but, I mean, come on. That speculation was real because it wasn't put to rest. But, I mean, when you go beyond the speculation and you just look at the condition of the facility and where it's at and all those factors, everything points toward that facility is going to be raised. So, yeah, it's too bad that interfered with people's ability to say, hey, what do we do about the new facility? Should it remain the old name? Should we think about a new name? Should we have some kind of community process or something? And again, that can still take place. Anything else? No. Okay. Right. Well, thank you. Anybody else here to speak on item number 6? Item number 6 is before us. Anybody here for public comment on item number 6? Seeing and hearing none. Item number 6, public comment is closed. With that, we have a motion to adopt the motion, and so that item is approved. Thank you. Item number 7.
Item number 7, GSD report relative to a request for authorization to negotiate and execute a new lease with LA Reflections for retail space in the Police Administration Building at 155 South Main Street.
Irene Salzman, Asset Management General Services. In December, GSD released a request for proposal to qualified vendors to provide a full-service restaurant at the Police Administration Building. In February, GSD received 3 vendor proposals, and we approved a proposal submitted by LA Reflections to operate a restaurant there. It'll be a full-service restaurant. It will offer a variety of main dishes, salads, sandwiches, side orders, soups, and beverages within the retail space at the PAB. It's in the northwest corner of 2nd and Main Street. I do have one technical correction in this report, and that is under the security deposit. It should have been a 2-month rent as security deposit, not 4 months.
So two months based on the minimum of $2.11 per square foot.
Correct.
Oh, okay. And I'm assuming that you mentioned beverages, et cetera. This is not being, there's no application for an alcohol license.
There will be,
There will be.
yes.
In the police station.
No, it's not in the police station. It's on the northwest corner of the lot. It's a separate building.
That building on the
Glass
corner.
building.
Yes, the one that's on it's on Second and Main. And the food is excellent. We have partake of the food.
Okay.
No. You said the cafeteria is on Second and Main?
Yes.
It's attached to the new facility?
Not really. I don't think that there is a way to get from the restaurant into the building, to the main building. You have to go outside.
Okay, so it's a separate building.
It's a separate building.
It's not in the building.
No, correct.
It's not in,
It's on the
it's
campus.
not in Parker Center. Oh, all right.
It's a separate building.
So it's on the city block.
Yes.
And Parker Center is the larger facility on that complex. And this is, I guess technically we could call it a complex because it's a
Right.
detached building.
It's just across the street from the Pit Fire restaurant. So it's on that corner. But it's a separate building.
All right. And also just to clarify that any application for alcohol license or what have you, is that a contingency of this lease or that's something that the leasee is going to?
No, the lessee will be
intend on?
doing it, and basically we'll probably have to,
It's a separate
respond,
application
yes.
process and
yes.
the state license, although the state does allow the local
But
government.
they do ask for our
Wait.
permission, for the city's permission.
Yeah, they
when you do
ask
the
for a
license.
letter.
Right.
On behalf of the city, which usually is the council office tends to be the one to submit that.
Right, or we usually do it as a letter from our general manager.
But when it comes to the public hearing on an
Oh,
alcohol license.
That's different, yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Is there anybody here to speak on item number 7? Yes.
Ava Kadarko with the Office of Councilwoman Jampiri. I'm just here in support of the RFP process that General Services went through. Specifically, we're very happy that we're going to be getting a full-service restaurant at that location to help integrate the Parker Center into the entire area that's across the street. Because there is a residential area over there.
Set the record straight.
Because there is a residential community there, and we would like to make sure that it is a residentially friendly area and a pedestrian-friendly area. So we're in support of the RFP
Okay.
findings.
And do we know what the hours of operation of this are anticipated right now?
It will be open 7 days a week. And it'll be open till late in the evenings, especially on weekends.
Will it be a breakfast, lunch, and dinner
Yes.
type facility?
Yes.
Okay.
All-
So basically from morning through the evening?
Correct.
Okay, it's not a part-time facility, it's a full-time
Correct.
facility. Okay.
It should be a nice addition to the community.
I hope so. Nice-looking facility. And it's just shy of 5,700 square feet. That's a pretty good size. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Is there anybody here to make public comment on item number 7? Public comment is open on item number 7. Okay, seeing, hearing no one come forward on additional public comment on item number 7.
We would like to move it forthwith.
Okay, hold on a second. So with that, public comment is closed on item number 7? Yes.
Yes, we would like to have it moved forthwith because we are under a time crunch
Okay.
to get it opened.
And when would this appear on council?
Close to be next Tuesday.
Okay, so this is the last committee it goes to?
Pardon me?
It's not anticipated going through another committee before going to council floor?
No, this is the only committee.
Okay. All right, so we'll get it to the council floor as soon as possible.
Thank you.
With that, this item is approved. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I ask if we could take number 12 out of order, because I have to go to a budget meeting very shortly.
Okay, all right. Thank you. We now move to item number 12.
Item number 12, CEO report relative to assessing public-private partnerships for city parking assets and related matters. This item has also been referred to the Transportation and Budget and Finance Committees.
Good afternoon, Sarai Bartlett, CAO's office. Several months ago, Several months ago, the mayor's office convened a working group consisting of staff from the mayor's office, the CAO, the CLA, and the city attorney's office to explore opportunities for potential public-private partnership with respect to the city's parking assets. This followed news that Chicago was working on a transaction for its parking meters. That transaction closed in February, and the city of Chicago received over $1.1 billion for that deal. 2 years ago, Chicago closed the transaction for its parking structures, 4 parking structures, and received over $560 million for that transaction. The report before you provides a preliminary discussion of the issues associated with the potential P3 parking transaction, and we request authority to negotiate and execute contracts for consultants to assist us with the evaluation and possible execution of a P3 parking transaction. The team that we're recommending is Scott Ballas Strategies as our independent financial analyst, JP Morgan, Ramirez and Company, and Loop Capital to serve as sell-side advisors, and we will also need transaction counsel. However, our city attorney is working on that process, and we don't have a name selected for you at this point. Regarding the selection process for the advisors, the CAO's office has pre-qualified lists that were approved by the mayor and council for financial advisors and for investment bank services. So we used that list and issued mini RFP to those firms on the list and received responses, reviewed the responses, conducted interviews, and based on the outcome of the proposals and the interviews, we selected these teams as for our recommendations.
Could you tell me again the two?
I'm sorry?
The two that you said you're recommending?
For sell-side advisor, JP Morgan, Ramirez and Company, and Loop Capital. And as independent financial analysts.
They're separate companies?
They are separate companies, three separate companies. Yes.
Okay.
JP Morgan to serve as lead, Ramirez and Company, and Loop Capital to serve as co-sell-side advisors.
Co-senior?
For this type of a transaction, we don't have the designation of senior or co-senior. JP Morgan would serve as the lead, and then the 2 other firms would assist as sell-side advisors. Subsequent to the release of the report, we were made aware of a situation regarding Government Code Section 1090, which deals with conflict of interest and is one of the terms in our proposed contract. That Government Code section basically says that a financial consultant cannot engage in a role in which it may have a financial conflict. And so because of this Government Code section, JP Morgan is unable to execute the agreement at this time. They're researching their options. So because of this circumstance and to avoid any delay in the process, we would like to go forward with Scott Ballas Strategies serving as the project lead advisor at this time.
What's the name of them, Scott?
Scott Ballas Strategies to serve as the project lead until such time as we can bring JP Morgan on. Loop Capital has indicated that they are not subject to the same constraints as JP Morgan with respect to Government Code Section 1090. So they are willing to and able to negotiate or execute a contract with us. And we are currently waiting to hear back from Ramirez on their position regarding Code Section 1090. So given the changes to the roles and responsibilities of the advisors, we would request flexibility in the compensation that we would be paying the advisors. It would still be subject to the not-to-exceed amount that's specified in the contract, in the proposed contract. But this would require that we substitute recommendation number 2, and I have that language for the clerk, if that is acceptable to the committee.
So compensation not to exceed, which is how much?
Well, it's based on a tiered structure. If the transaction involves, basically if the transaction involves parking meters, compensation to the advisors would be 1.25% up to the first million, plus 0.5% if it exceeds 250 million. If the transaction involves meters and structures, then it's 0.8%.
can we have have sitting up here the CLA, point person from the CLA's office, point person from the mayor's office, point person from the city attorney's office, and the CAO all up here, please?
While they're coming up, could I just ask, have we done any kind of review to ensure that these companies that are being recommended, are they in any way involved in our lawsuit as it relates to the insurance lawsuit that DWP and LAWA and the city are involved in? And secondly, are they in any way involved in the nationwide economic collapse that we've read so much about?
Natalie Brill with Sales Office. J.P. Morgan, Goldman, UBS, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, they are all in the municipal lawsuit that the city has filed.
Okay, that's on the insurance? And
That's on both the GIC side, correct. And that lawsuit really has more to do with the investment side of those firms. This is on the other side, which is not really the banking, but the underwriter side. And this, I believe the sell-side advisors fall into that category. When the lawsuit was first filed about a year and a half ago, I think, we met with the city attorney's staff working on the lawsuit, as well as with the attorney the outside counsel attorney, and we had just gone through the process of having the mayor and council approve the qualified list. And we asked that question, do we have to throw out the list? And the response that we received from both the city attorney and from the outside counsel was no, that we could proceed. It was really up to each of the underwriting firms if they wanted to do business with us, and of course they all did. And also, if we were comfortable, and since they weren't really the same individuals, we moved forward. We felt at that point that it was in the best interest of the city to use those firms and just, rotate them through as we have been with the local regional firms as well as the large firms. So that's been our strategy, and I don't think that we've suffered for that. In the meantime, Lehman Brothers, UBS, Bear Stearns, and there's one,
Merrill?
and Merrill has merged. So 4 of those have gone away, and we really only have left Citi, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Goldman, and JP. So part of the problem was who do we go to for nationwide selling of our bonds? And so the strategy was that we would have small local firms for California and larger firms for this nationwide. So coming back to this process, we felt it was similar, and since they were already on our list, we went ahead and moved forward with the 11 firms that we asked for this mini RFP, as Sarai indicated.
And if I understood you correctly, when we said that Morgan had a conflict of interest, did I hear you correctly? Yeah. I mean,
Good afternoon, Councilmember. I'm Noreen Vincent from the City Attorney's Office. And when we released the most recent RFP, we specifically included language that indicated that they would have to comply with Government Code Section 1090. And there were some areas, for example, if we were going to retain a sell-side advisor to work with us, we felt very much that they could not be on the other side of the transaction and provide staple financing for one of the proposers or one of the potential concessionaires. That would indeed be a violation of Government Code Section 1090. We included language in our contract that required compliance. There was some question on the part of J.P. Morgan as to how far the 1090 went in terms of its application. That is, for example, did it apply if there were potential proposers who also had lines of credit or bank account deposits with J.P. Morgan. The law in that area is not that clear, but we felt in an abundance of caution that we should include the 1090 language. My understanding is that J.P. Morgan did consult with private counsel, determined that they were indeed covered by 1090, and the extent of what 1090 would preclude, I think, is an area where they're looking for clarification.
either by way of seeking an Attorney General opinion on that matter, or, and possibly both, seeking some sort of a legislative solution to the issue.
Just for clarification, 1090 just is a matter of law, so it applies to Loop and everybody else. But the issue is that the smaller firms just do not have the extensive network of relationships that the Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and firms like that have. So J.P. Morgan, may have banking account relationships in a division in Spain to somebody that happens to be one of our bidders, and that creates an issue. The law is completely unclear, but it creates an issue about whether that could be a 1090 violation. And I'm sure, as you know, Councilman, the violation of 1090 is a felony, and it also allows the city to cancel its contract. So the investment banker that we might hire would be in this awkward position of potentially doing a great deal of work, gets to the finish line, and we say, I'm sorry, there's a 1090 violation, we're not going to pay you. And, we're referring the matter to the DA. So they're saying, look, we can't afford that kind of exposure if this is, and I think our collective conclusion has been that this affects every P3 project in the state. It is no more, it's equally true of the MTA, it's true of every place. So really what we're saying is that without some sort of clarification from the Attorney General, we either have to hire firms such as Scott Ballas that we're recommending to you today as our lead in the interim, people that do not have the banking relationships in Spain as some of these big firms do, or we need to get clarification from the Attorney General or perhaps state legislation.
Thank you.
Now, this item is relative to the parking structures owned by the city and potentially the parking meters along the streets within the city that are owned by the city of Los Angeles?
Correct.
Those parking meters? Now, what's the magnitude, the potential magnitude of revenue agreement if it's just the parking facilities versus parking and parking meters?
Well, that's part of the reason why we would like to bring in the consultants, is to help us flesh out what the revenue potentials are for structuring it either as just the structures, the transaction as just structures, or the structures and the meter assets.
Is one dwarfed by the other? Or are they relatively similar in magnitude?
We have found that the general consensus is if we include meters with the structures, it will be a considerably larger transaction.
Okay.
Are you able to study them separate, or do they have to be merged?
They can be looked at separately.
Yeah, we expect it's our job to make the case to you we need, as Sarai said, we need to find professionals to help us do this, but we do think it's our job to make the case to you that here's what we get if we do it just with meters, here's what we might get if we did structures, and here's what A plus B ends up with.
Now, conceivably, if we were to go with structures and or meters, the bottom line is we would be looking at a lump sum to the city to turn over this responsibility to a private party, or we could have a hybrid where they give us a lump sum and then also revenue stream. And my second question is, what revenue stream are we receiving from our meters and structures? That we know. We don't need a consultant for that answer, right?
Right. The form of compensation is something that we would also need to explore. It could come in the form of a lump sum, or it could be a lump sum plus some revenue sharing over time, or revenue sharing over time, period. And those are the options that we would need to study to see what we would recommend.
So what's the current revenue from the meters, and what's the current revenue from the structures?
I don't have that information with me. Do you have that information?
Yeah, the meters, sir, I'm sorry, I'm Mike Healy, Senior Advisor to the Mayor. So I should have identified myself. I apologize. Meter revenues to date in this fiscal year, Councilman, are 17, this is, I'm sorry, through the end of February. I do not yet have March numbers, $17.3 million. I'd like to point out that that is $10 million under the budget projections of the department that we received at the beginning of the year.
Now that's meters?
Yes, this is just meters. And then if we turned it, is that okay, sir? Now that's gross.
That's
that does
2
not,
months.
Pardon?
That's just the 2 months.
Per month. So right now, I'm sorry, what I'm saying is it's cumulative through February is $17.3 million. Right now, it's running at approximately $2.7 million per month, coming in a quarter at a time at our meters. So that's the current meter. Now, that's gross, and one of the things that we will be exploring with you in coming weeks is the fact that these meters, as those of you who know have tried to use them, are beyond their useful life and need a substantial capital upgrade. So though the gross is extremely important, it's also important to look at the net, which is how much do we end up with after we've made these capital investments, and that's again part of what we expect to study with our advisors. So we can explain to you here, after you make the necessary capital investments, here's what we're looking at. And then it will be, you know, the discussion we'll have, the council will have is which way they're most comfortable proceeding.
Now, $32 million a year, approximately, by my calculation, are the meter revenue.
Correct.
To the city. Gross.
Gross.
And then the structures?
If I could just take it one structure at a time, the Hollywood and Highland Hollywood and Highland is owned by the city, but we lose money after debt service on Hollywood and Highland. So right now, the city has $75 million approximately of debt.
Yes.
And the debt service on Hollywood and Highland exceeds the net income after operating expenses. It admittedly has been trending down. We're getting closer and closer to break even, but one of the reasons the mayor wanted to look at this is, why are we coming out of pocket every year to own a facility that we may not need to own anymore? So that's on Hollywood and Highland. On ArcLight Structures, owned by the CRA, same idea. It loses money. The debt service every year exceeds the net operating income for that particular facility. Pershing Square has no debt and generates approximately $2 million a year to support Rec and Parks facilities. And that's one of the things we'll have to study, is how do we make Rec and Parks whole on that $2 million a year that they're enjoying from Pershing Square. Then the other structures are smaller structures, Broxton and Robertson, and Broxton is in Westwood, Robertson and Cherokee and Hollywood. These each generate approximately $1 million a year gross. So that's $3 million a year gross for all of them. Net would be substantially less than that.
So the real opportunity is in the meters.
Correct.
That's where the real money is.
And again, we're not prepared to talk about valuations. It's probably the most important question, so we certainly look forward to that conversation. But the idea is that the meters are also a risky business, and so we really want to assess the whole capital program and the whole idea of how often they need to be replaced and what are we talking about over a lifetime.
Now, this type of partnership or contract with the municipality, apparently Chicago is the most relevant example?
Thus far, yes. Many jurisdictions are exploring this for the same reason that LA is.
Yeah, but exploration is just speculation. If somebody's actually done it, that should usually tell us a lot about what we could expect. Any reports so far, any analysis so far when it comes to Chicago?
I think we've all read about transition problems, and the mayor has expressed dismay that the vendor hasn't moved as fast as the vendor had hoped to upgrade equipment. But the transaction has now been closed about 2 months. I think that there are certainly I think the vendor itself has admitted in the press that they didn't do what they should have done to plan for the transition, and I think we believe we can learn from those mistakes.
And what was their basic structure with this?
They were clear I think in certainly every deal that I know of that they've done, they were clear that they had a single goal, which is the maximum upfront single cash payment. And what they have done with that cash is they've established various reserves. So it's not like they're using that immediately to solve this month's general fund deficit. They actually have managed to salt away at least $400 million worth of reserves that are available to them to solve this year's budget problems and future budget problems. They've also, from the first deal they did, the structure deal, for example, they put together a dedicated fund to replace the revenue that the Parks District in Chicago was enjoying from some of those structures, which is what we're suggesting we'll need to figure out for Pershing Square as well.
So is it your job, all of you, to tell us all the potential upsides of this, or do you want to share with us perhaps some of the things that might be of concern or we should be a little weary about, or things that perhaps aren't very clear, but be it a legal perspective or otherwise?
When the most important question in value is what's going to happen to rates. And in Chicago, for example, they are in a situation where they had not raised rates for many years. I forget, it was 10 or 15 or 20. I mean, it was a long time. And frankly, I think their rates were exactly where ours were before the council raised them last year. And so we can't really respond to a value question until we have a conversation with the council about where they want to go on rates. And it would be natural, for example, to say, well, why don't we just say that we'll change the rates whenever we agree to change the rates, and we're not the least bit interested in giving a vendor any promise about what we're going to do with the rates in the future, because as we can see in current economic conditions, we need to make judgments as depending on the circumstances at the time. I think it's our job to explain to you this is what that would do to value. And if you were willing, for example, to say we promise that meter rates will go up by CPI, then you would get additional value. And if you're willing to do something more than CPI, then there's yet additional value. So that those trade-offs, public policy judgments, which are yours alone, can be quantified, and you can have a better picture of, if you do A, here's the result. If you do B, here's the result. Where's your comfort level? So I think that what we tried to do what the CAO tried to do by attaching the list of public policy questions is to say there's a great deal of dialogue that we need to have with the council to assess the very reasonable questions that you're asking. And we're hoping with the help of our advisors that we can do that over the next coming weeks and months so that we get to a point where we sort of have a sense that if we were able to deliver a concession that meets these parameters, that might be in the ballpark or not.
I think there's some other issues, public policy issues too, that you need to consider. One of the biggest ones are what we discussed in the report, specifically the issue of what a priority is for the mayor and council. Where do you want the city to spend its resources as a policy issue? I think those have come to a head in the last couple of years as we've seen our revenues dwindle. I think that's also a very large policy issue that I think this gives us the opportunity to talk about. What's the most important thing that the city can do? Is it to run parking lots, or is it to run police stations? I mean, that's the policy issues that we brought forth. Chicago also discussed some of those issues. They had labor issues, they had issues of technology. What's the best way of having parking meters? There's the whole list in the back, I think, that between the mayor's office, the CLA, and our office put together. We realize that it is a complicated issue, and we've tried to identify those issues that we felt were important, and obviously we look forward to discussions on what you feel we should be looking at, because, as Mike said, there haven't been a lot of these. There have been a lot in Europe, but there haven't been a lot in the United States. They're becoming more prevalent now, and most of them have been done in toll roads, to be honest with you. Soraya and I attended some public-private partnership training in Denver with Patty Hubert, our ACAO, in November to see what was out there. And most of it is transportation, toll road related. Parking is the new kid on the block. So we would like to know what issues you have that we can explore with our independent financial advisor.
Now, in Chicago, what was the time period of that agreement? Wasn't it 75 years?
I think
so. 75 years for the parking meters and 99 years for the structures.
That's a long time.
Yeah, but my next question is, are we looking at 75 years or 99 years, or are we looking at a different time frame?
Again, I think that's, we'd like our advisors to be able to quantify those choices so we can come back to you and show here's the menu of choices that we face. But I think in internal discussions, I think the working group that's before you today has felt pretty uncomfortable beyond 55, 50.
Yeah, but understand this, comfort or discomfort is one thing. It's looking at the legal lines and where we draw our line. Because when it comes to property rights in this country, there are some legal parameters. Everybody looks at them differently. After a certain period of time, it's kind of like who really is the owner. I mean, there's those kinds of parameters that may be dictating to us and where we want to draw the line as the City of Los Angeles.
There is state law that limits the term of the lease to, I think it was 55
And
years.
is Chicago in California?
No.
It's in a different state.
It's
right?
in Illinois. So
they
they have a
perhaps
different
had
set of
different
rules and
parameters.
regulations. We have, for example, limitations in the state in terms of the length of lease that we can have. We have Government Code Section 1090, they don't. So as various issues come up, our office is involved in working with the team to identify and to address the issues. And we know, for example, if you choose to progress with this, as we enter into any sort of a contract or resulting contract, for example, rate setting is something that can't be delegated. So we would have to address that and make provisions for any sort of rate increases. It wouldn't be up to the concessionaire or the vendor to do that. It would be up to the council to make some determinations as to that. So as we progress, certain other issues may come into play, and we're working closely with the team to identify those issues and address them and provide some solutions to that. We're looking to actually pull together a team. As was indicated, we have gone to an RFQ for outside counsel to assist with the P3 structure. We've conducted the interviews and are down to, I guess, doing the last negotiations. And it's our, I guess, hope that we should be back before you within a very short period of time with that. But we are also committed to working, our office is committed to working with this and to identify the certain areas of law, for example, real property, there's a CEQA issue, there's a bond issue, and we have attorneys in our office who are prepared to come together as a team and provide assistance and advice and to work with any outside counsel that we retain in this matter as well.
There is a 99-year rule that I've been reminded of that you can do, but it's subject to 5-year.
It's subject to 5-year renewals and some sort of adjustment for the price.
For the
so
market
there's a
value.
whole variety of other things.
But, you know, just as a policy, when we started, when the CAO's office started looking at the difference in value, the question always becomes, how much more value do you get in 25 years more? You know, personally, I don't think CAO, you know, why would you want to go beyond 50 years? That's something we're looking at, but, you know, that's a difficult question, I think.
Now, it's beginning of April. The City of Los Angeles has a budget process that is vetted and completed by, Mr. Chairman, mid-May. Is there any anticipation that this prospective mechanism might impact the 9-10 budget, both the process and the actual budget?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there is. The mayor has, as he's been assessing many difficult choices for his budget, he is anticipating that some transaction would go forward. I don't think we're prepared to discuss numbers or the parameters of that until the mayor presents his budget, and in fact, he can still change his mind. So, but there is an assumption that some deal will go forward, and I think we're certainly aware of the concerns that have been expressed about the difference between the meter deal and the structure deal, and the possibility that one may happen and one may not, or that one happens more quickly and one happens more slowly. Those are all factors that the mayor is weighing as he's finalizing his budget.
So where we're at right now, and what is the likelihood that we could actually be signing a contract with someone in 60 days, 90 days, 120 days?
I think
anybody have a perspective on
it's
that?
pretty low, but it partly depends on the speed with which we engage in the public policy conversations with with this committee and with the other committees in the council that have relevant jurisdiction. I think that we're aware of the timeline, and if there's funds in the budget, then that means it has to happen in the next fiscal year, which gives us technically till June of 2010. And I think that we believe that this should close. Chicago closed it was less than a year, approximately 9 months. Now, the mayor points out that the mayor of Chicago has a lot more sway, and so they may, it could be that their accelerated timeline is not something that we can attain here, but we are trying to move as fast as we can.
I would hope that we'd be closer to July of 2009 rather than June 2010, because if we put it in 2009-10 budget and we start spending it and it doesn't exist, that then puts us in a bind to where we start unraveling it every week because it never came in. And we've mentioned to the mayor's budget team that we hope that everything that's in the budget at least is vetted to where we're not given a $100 million project that hasn't quite been cooked, and then we start paving streets and cutting trees only to find out that $100 million doesn't exist. So if we're looking at June 2010 would help us a great deal on 10-11.
Or digging out of the hole that may have been created in 9-10.
I mean, and we sit here every week. I don't know if we could go through a year of what we don't know, and then on top of it, what we do know, that we've added something in the budget that we know doesn't exist. The unknown is tough enough to deal with.
I think it's a very important question. I'm sure one that we'll have an opportunity to discuss in the budget deliberations, and I think it will be our job to defend both the mayor's proposal and the timing and the numbers specifically. So where we're here today not saying much about value, to the extent that there is a target in the budget, I think we'll have to be able to defend that when the budget is presented.
The report also includes an attachment that talks about the timeline, and we're hoping the consensus of the group is to try to close by December. That's our goal.
I have to run to another meeting to talk about this budget process. But let me just throw a couple of things out if I can. The things that I think are important to me is that I mentioned earlier that as we go through this analysis, I think it's absolutely essential that we have that separate parking lot and meter issue that stand on their own, and to where when we evaluate them, they're not so commingled that we can't separate the good and the bad. That also we have to, I would hope that we'd ensure with our current lawsuits, also this financial scandal in New York about pensions and this overall economy, that we vetted these people so that we don't get in the middle of it and find out, they're suspect number 3. And so we need to make sure that. And then the other issue, it would be very helpful to ensure when we get this report that we actually know what's going on in Chicago, that we're not reading the Tribune or something, trying to piece it together, that we know that they actually have underwriters, they've actually sold these bonds, they've done some. We need to know the actuality as to the philosophical issue, because again, we have a limited ability to spin the philosophical. So we need to know exactly what they've achieved. And then one of the things I would hope that, because most of this money, unless we go into a revenue stream and lump sum, most of this money is one-time money. So I would hope that we'd have an expenditure plan that's being recommended. And personally, I'd hope that most of the expenditure is not necessarily in the budget for multi-year projects with one-time money, that we're doing things like reserve fund and rainy day funds and things that we can look at this money over time. And then the last one is that I would hope that we'd have a very good analysis on deal points as to where we could make an analysis of whether lump sum versus annual revenue stream or those kinds of issues, how relevant they are, so that we could make this decision over, because we're really tying the hands of councils for the next 50 years. 60 years? See, one of the footnotes you should put is that you could only have this unless the same people are here in 55 years. That's a joke.
Is that an official recommendation?
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Parks. I have some questions regarding the recommendation of J.P. Morgan, Chase, Ramirez and Company, and Loop Capital. What brought them to the top? What was it about that those three firms that made them the recommended firms?
I think the consensus of the group was they really stood out at the time that we did the interviews, and that they were very much more persuasive in their position and the skills that they were going to bring forward to the transaction compared to the other teams that we looked at.
So they were good presenters? They dressed nice? They combed their hair well?
No,
I want you to be a little bit more specific, because this is the transaction this is the kind of transaction that I don't think the city of Los Angeles has record of participating in. So who we're going to depend on to actually to play this out in reality, to go from concept to reality, is very critical. So can you be a little bit more specific about what they brought to the table that made them stand out as being the recommended firms?
From our perspective, it had to do with experience. They've had great experience dealing with these types of transactions on a national as well as an international level, and we believe that they were the stronger presenter on those issues.
So the other firms lacked this kind of transaction experience compared to these three firms?
They did not.
I think one point is that we did ask people to form their own teams, and so to some extent we were not evaluating each individual sell-side advisor, but we took the team as it was presented to us.
So this was one of the teams that
This was
applied.
one of the teams.
So again, what is it about this particular team that made them stand above all the other teams?
A couple of things. Number one, Ramirez actually did the work for the city of Chicago, and we've been, as a team, we've sort of put a lot of bonus points on direct frontline experience in the Chicago transactions, because we're hoping, as we've said, there's certainly many differences between Chicago and Los Angeles, but someone that has had firsthand experience in Chicago seemed to us to be advantageous. A second point that the working group that is before you today decided was that you remember that Ms. Vincent mentioned the concerns about 1090 and the issue that when we're especially at the level of Goldman Sachs or J.P. Morgan, that we didn't believe that someone could be our advisor and also provide financing to the city. So that drove us to the conclusion that we did not want multiple advisors. So one, why not have Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan, especially if you can lock them in a room and say, here's the pie, you guys figure out how to split it up. So it was at least theoretically possible that we would end up with a larger team at the same cost. But as a group, I think we said, no, we don't want to do that if, in fact, anybody that is our advisor cannot provide financing to a buyer. We would prefer that there were more financing sources out there. So we said, okay, let's keep with a smaller team. And then the question becomes the team of J.P. Morgan, Ramirez, and Loop compared to the other teams that were presented to us. The J.P. Morgan team was cheaper than Goldman Sachs and Cabrera. It depends on what you assume about the transaction costs, but the spreadsheet that I'm looking at shows the biggest delta between the two firms was about $2.5 million, $2.25 million. I'm sorry, and so that was. No, we haven't released this publicly. I mean, the responses, I don't think, are Marina, the responses that we got are the specific proposals. Is there any reason we couldn't provide those to the committee, or?
No.
I don't know what
You've done that. You've done the transmittal at this point, so those you'd be able to provide that information.
Okay. So we can provide you the specific proposals that we got from firms if you're interested, but the spreadsheet is derived from those proposals, and that's.
I'm very interested, and that's one of the things that I personally have a problem with in this city. is, having been a policymaker at the state level, which is a different level of government, and having been a member of that legislative body, and being a member of this legislative body, all too often, I'm provided with tertiary information, but not detailed information, and yet I'm looking at recommendations from staff. And although I'm not saying that I see anything on the surface that causes me concern about the recommendations in the CAO's recommendations 1 through 5, but how am I supposed to feel as though I can agree with those recommendations before I decide what my answer is going to be? Because all too often staff talks about, well, council members, that's a policy decision that you will be making. Council members, that's a policy decision for you to make. Yet at the same time, I'm really acting on recommendations of staff without all of the information that you had in order to provide me with your recommendation as to why you feel comfortable saying, these are the ones. This is how we feel the policy should actually be implemented. So when you ask the city attorney sitting here, if it's okay to give me a document, and she says, well, of course, it's fine now. Well, I haven't even seen that document, and I'm going to be expected to vote on the CAO's recommendations.
The proposals, of course, sir, were just part of, we also spent 2 days in interviews, because we interviewed, we've gone through a great deal of process to talk to people. We've checked out references. We've talked to people that have used these firms in different locations, and it's certainly more than just simply getting their proposals, and we're here to have as much conversation with you as you wish.
Which I would never pretend to second guess, having been in that room, because I can't reenact that.
Right.
But all the more reason why whatever information can be made available to the policymakers should be made available to the policymakers as soon as legally possible, so that we can have enough time to formulate in our minds and sleep on it or what have you, rather than looking at the clock and saying, well, this committee's gone long enough, I've lost the quorum, maybe it's time for us to just close down and then agree with staff, or not.
Again, sir, I'm open to your suggestions. We're happy to provide the specific proposals that we got from firms, but the recommendation that the working group has made is based on a variety of factors, some of which you'll see in the proposals and some of which you won't. And
sure. But all I'm saying is, whatever it is that you have available that legally and appropriately can be seen by my eyes,
okay,
my office, I'd like it as soon as possible.
Okay, we'll provide those to you.
Not because I happen to stumble upon a question and you refer to a particular document, and then I ask a question, well, do I have that document? And the city attorney says, well, yeah, you can have it. There's no problem with that. Legally, there's no reason why you can have that. And yet I'm here making a decision without that information. Is that information relevant, do you think?
No, not particularly, because it's a written proposal, sir. And no, let me put it this way. The issue is, are you going to, would you like to conduct the interviews yourself? Would you like to engage in a de novo, brand-new proceeding? And if you would, that is certainly your prerogative, and perhaps we should set up a panel of interviews for you with the various people that applied, that responded to the RFP. But
if I did that, what would I need you for?
Sir, it's your choice, but we're saying to you that you're asking in this committee to look at the written proposal. We're happy to provide that to you, but we're encouraging you to remember that there were a variety of reasons that the people before you made the decision they did, and it was unanimous.
When the underwriter RFQ went out and we set up the 4 pools, these 11 firms all qualified. There was no doubt that when we did the initial, what we spent 3 months going through and putting together the 4 pools of the fixed rate, the variable rate, the land assessment, and its unique financings, as we call it, those 11 firms all qualified. The question became, okay, now that they've all qualified, what's the criteria that we're going to look at to see which firms are the best for this particular deal? So when we sat down as a team, I would say the 6 of us, because I guess Ben Sehoff from the mayor's office was there also,
Who were the six?
There's 3 voting members on the, what do we call it, our working group?
Yeah, working group.
Ben Sahaf from the mayor's office, the CAO's office, and Roy Morales from the CLA's office. Each of us has expertise that we brought to the table. Obviously, Mike Healy is with the mayor's office. Patty Tubert was hired by the CLA to provide input also, and we hired Scott Ballas Strategies as the independent financial advisor, also from a list. When we all got together to look at these, one of the things that we were very concerned about was buy-side experience, meaning they had worked for an issuer before, or a lot of issuers, and they had also worked for, and they had also direct experience with parking. Well, there's only really been a couple of parking deals of this magnitude that compare to us. Again, as a big city, there's not a lot of deals out there. You know, there was one in Harrisburg, there was ours, there was some associated with airports. So when we looked at that, what we found was that the team that JP Morgan and Ramirez had put together had better experience in these types of transactions. And they were able to communicate that experience both in the oral interview as well as obviously first in their proposal much better than the other 3 firms. Is that an objective criteria? Subjective as we can get within that subjective line of how they express their opinions, how they express their information to us so we could form an opinion. After each of the interviews, we took the proposal, we took the answers to our questions, and we ranked them basically. And for all of us, the ranking was, as we're telling you now, it came out, JP and Ramirez and Luke. I don't know, Roy, if you'd like to say a few words about how we did the process since you were there.
Actually, Mr. Chair, Roy Morales with the CLA's office. Back in January, the mayor's office approached Mr. Miller asking us to join in helping develop this proposal. What Mr. Miller envisioned was a 3-step process for this to be brought to council, heard by council, and then possibly approved by council. We are now at the first phase right now, where we were developing with the group a pool of applicants who essentially will help the city staff to develop the proposal for council to consider. That is the process that Natalie was describing. The interviews were extensive. As Natalie mentioned and as the mayor's office mentioned, the discussions were centered on 4 of the 5 respondents that had solid proposals, 2 of which were outstanding, 1 of which stood above the other in terms of the key personnel that were being assigned, the experience on both the buy side and the sell side. There was extensive experience on both sides of the transaction by the proposers, as well as the secondary issues, the presentation, the price, the stated expertise, the perspective of the team was very significant because, as was mentioned, there were team proposals that were submitted. What came out was the proposal from JP Morgan, Loop, and Ramirez as the top proposal. In terms of expertise, myself and Ms. Tubert, Patty Tubert, were involved for the CLA. Our involvement was specifically to ask all the questions to make sure that when this process goes through and is presented to council, that it is presented in such a way that you have options. That you have options at the beginning stage, which is now, where we are anticipating hiring the experts to help the city staff to develop the bid package, for lack of a better term. The next phase of this process, if you so choose to let this move forward, is the actual bid package itself, what eventually comes out of this first phase. That is all the terms and conditions, and I believe there's a whole list of policy issues that need to be addressed between now and then. That would also be presented to this committee and to the council for consideration before it's ever put out on the street. The third component, of course, is the award phase. In that entire process, we asked a series of questions, both in meetings and emails, trying to develop what we considered to be the major components, raise the issues, and in speaking with Mr. Miller once again this morning, we endorse the recommendations of the CAO. In fact, the alternative recommendation to also include Scott Ballas Strategies as part of the project team to develop this proposal. and we would recommend moving forward at this time.
Now, it was mentioned by more than one individual that this group, J.P. Morgan, Ramirez, and Loop Capital, that their experience, not only their presentation, but their experience that they brought to the table on these kinds and/or similar transactions that are applicable to experience toward this kind of transaction.
Yes.
Was that based on the firm having been engaged, or particular individuals that were brought to light that they had worked on, for example, the Chicago deal, or they happened to work on a particular toll road deal, or what have you?
Mm-hmm.
Was it the firm itself generically, or was it individuals that are within that firm that would be assigned to this project?
Mm-hmm. And as you will see, I'm actually going to, when I get back to my desk, email the proposals to your staff. As you will see, it's a combination of both. There are some of the key personnel assigned for a particular division or for a particular project that were involved in the Chicago deal, advertising deal in the San Juan Airport. There was advertising for the Midway project. There was the Turnpike, Pennsylvania Turnpike project. So there's a list of them, as you will see. Alligator Alley was another project they were involved in. You will see the list of experience of that particular team with the individuals that are assigned, the key personnel. And one thing we made certain in the interviews is to ensure that the staff that were presenting the materials, the staff that were listed, will stay with this project. We don't want a swapping of staff. We don't want the superstars to come in only to be swapped out later on. We got that assurance from every single one of the presenters that these personnel will be assigned.
What mechanism is the city going to use to make sure that they don't swap somebody out without telling us? Is it prospectively they need to let us know if somebody leaves the firm? And remember, in this particular industry, there's a lot of people moving around right now.
Yes, there are.
It's actually in the contract, Councilman. We were very, very concerned about that because we do know there are other major cities moving forward with parking. So one of the agreements in the contract was to let us know if they were going to be involved with other agencies, and that basically they would not be involved with anyone to a certain point in the process. And then as we moved forward and that amount of work was completed, then they could go forward. Because we can't prevent the business from having no, but we wanted to make sure we had their full attention. And I believe that was a section in the contract.
But there's actually break points in time.
Yeah.
For
Yes.
example, somebody interviews and they're very happy because they have the person who actually structured the deal for Chicago, or the person who actually structured the deal on a particular project that is relevant, and that experience is good to have on the team. There's also break points. It's like they could be interviewing, and all of a sudden within a month, because it's been a few months now, right? All of a sudden that person moves over to Goldman Sachs because they offered him a deal he or she couldn't refuse. All of a sudden they're not around. My point is, we still have an opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, one of their strongest assets, and the reason why they stood head and shoulders above everybody else, is no longer part of their team. So therefore, are they still the ones we want? My next question to you is, after explaining that, is the contract is written where they are to let us know if there's any key personnel changes that will not be applicable to our transaction if they in fact continue, if we hire them to do the work?
Councilmember, we do have a provision in the contract which was provided to J.P. Morgan, Loop, and Ramirez, and in it we basically asked them to identify the key personnel, and we specifically list them in an exhibit, and we essentially say that it's because of the special expertise of these particular individuals and the number of years of experience, and that they will be available to perform under the terms of this agreement immediately upon commencement of the term. We consider the services of the consultant's key personnel essential to the consultant's performance under this agreement, and consultant shall use its best efforts to avoid any changes to key personnel during the term of this agreement. So we've made it very clear that the people that were identified, that the people that we are relying upon are key personnel, and we've had them agree under the terms of this contract, acknowledge, recognize, and make every effort to avoid any sort of, if somebody quits the firm, there's not a whole lot we could do, but we would require then, if there were a reason that somebody had to leave once we executed the contract, that we be allowed to give the yes or approval to whoever would be replacing, and we would expect someone with the same level of service and experience and expertise.
And
Yeah, but the thing that caught my attention is to do everything that they can. In other words, which, as a lawyer, you understand that's all we can do. Like you said, we can't tell them, you cannot let this person go. I mean,
Well, they can't
beyond our
stop
control.
that person from
Yeah,
going.
exactly.
We can tell them that you're not going to release this person from doing work under our contract. We need for you.
But if that person leaves the firm, then by default, they're not going to be working on the contract unless they go to a, now if somebody leaves JP and goes to Ramirez, I would assume that Ramirez would keep them on the team. But if somebody leaves JP and then they go to Goldman and Goldman's not part of the team, then that person's not going to be working on the deal.
Correct. This is, Councilmember, this is the language that we use in most of our agreements when we have key personnel, and it's the best we can do to safeguard and to have the contractor acknowledge the importance of the key personnel.
Okay. What,
If I may.
on this matter, I'm going to add something which is going to ask that the appropriate entity within this team, be it the CAO, the CLA, the city attorney, or mayor's office, that they reconfirm with J.P. Morgan, Ramirez and Company, and Loop Capital, that they have them reconfirm to the city that the bodies / expertise that they identified is still in place.
Actually, representatives are here from each firm today, sir, so.
That's okay. I want it in writing
And-
to the city, and I want to see it.
And the one, I also wanted to point out from Ramirez, the one particular person who worked on the Chicago transaction is with us today, if you care to ask him specifically about his experience.
No, not
He would
necessary.
be identified as a key individual in our contract.
Thank you.
In addition, Patricia Tuber, consultant for the CLA, in addition to this information, which we will provide you in writing, I just wanted to point out, to give you a little bit more comfort, that no, you can't, of course, stop them from leaving the firm, but if we do not approve the replacement, there is a provision for termination for convenience. And so if we don't feel that the firm is still up to snuff, we can terminate it and move to somebody else.
That makes me feel better, but as of right now, it appears that the firms are required to be proactive about letting us know if any changes take place that are relevant changes to the key personnel that have caused us to say, we like you, we like your team, that's why we're hiring you. But what I'm asking of right now is, when this leaves this committee between now and the next committee, and it shouldn't take more than a few minutes of their time, right? A day or two for them to look over their language and make sure that they're comfortable with forwarding us on their letterhead that we're still intact, for example. And if they're not intact, we should know that. And if they're not intact, there goes the opportunity for us to say, if they say, well, we don't have this person anymore, but this person is probably better, right? Probably better isn't good enough. It's up to us to say, we agree that that person's better. We're not skipping any expertise here. We're still intact. We're still fine. Yes.
That is exactly what happened with Ramirez. We just got a letter from them this morning indicating that someone had left their firm who had worked on Chicago and who had previously been identified by Ramirez as a key member of the team. And we actually got an upgrade in that process with Fernando Grillo, who is here with us today. Obviously, that would be the person who we would be identifying in our contract as the key person. And we'll, of course, as you suggested, put those names in writing.
You're reading my mind. So, but again, as a policymaker, I'd like to see it in writing. Right. No offense to anybody. If they're willing to say it, they should be able to write it. We have it on record. It makes us all better off in the long run. Okay. Any other points you'd like to bring up to this committee? Okay. I know we're at the beginning of the process, and one of my questions is the $500,000. Now that is for, you feel comfortable that that's enough for this phase of this process? Obviously, $500,000 isn't going to be the end-all or be-all of all the fees that we're going to be paying aside from the percentage fees when it comes to advising on this deal. But for this phase, to get us to the next point, $500,000 is all you need.
No, we don't think that that's sufficient, but we think that's sufficient to cover for this fiscal year.
Well, I guess I'd say it should be sufficient for us to have the conversation with the council about whether or not you're interested in a meter transaction. And
Which I see that in my mind as the
that's a
next
really
step.
very important question.
Okay.
And so we should be able to have that conversation and get through some of these very important early policy conversations. And we will, as we are managing our resources, I mean, obviously we have a firsthand knowledge of the city's budget predicament, so we have no interest in spending cash like drunken sailors.
And we don't have cash to spend like drunken sailors.
We do not.
Those days are gone. So this is enough money for us to get the advice that we're going to be getting and the progress for the month of April, May,
Beginning
and June.
phases.
Right?
Right.
And then we anticipate somewhere around the beginning of the next fiscal year, we may be looking at another dialogue and perhaps along with it some other monies for this category of purposes.
And by that point, we would hope we would have some concurrence from council that if you go in this direction, we're generally more comfortable, and in this other direction, we're generally less comfortable.
Especially if anybody's going to want to include this in the 9-10 budget process.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We do have a public comment card. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We do have a public comment card, SEIU Local 721, Paul Hayes. Where there's an empty seat up here, grab it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your time. Hello, my name is Paul Hayes. I'm speaking on behalf of the city employees who are members of SEIU Local 721. SEIU Local 721 has serious reservations regarding the...
Excuse me, Paul, you're speaking as a member of Local 721?
I'm a
or as
staff
one of the
person, I'm
officials?
sorry. I'm a staff person.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a...
So you're on behalf of the union, not only a member of it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I'm a staff person with SEIU Local 721.
Thank you.
We have serious reservations regarding the efficacy and prudence of some of the proposed public-private partnerships covered by this CAO report that's filed today. We would like to draw specific attention to the proposal regarding the parking meters. As you're aware, Chicago has recently entered into a long-term public-private partnership with Chicago Meters LLC, of which Morgan Stanley is a majority shareholder, for its metered parking system. As has already been discussed, the implementation of this arrangement in Chicago has not gone smoothly, which has raised significant public protest. I won't go into the details of the problems because it seems like people here are already aware of them. However, there's also been some independent analysis by sponsored by Chicago Alderman, and excuse me if I mispronounce his name, Wagisbach, and also preliminary analysis conducted by former Cook County CFO and current DePaul University professor Woods Bowman. And they have raised specific questions about whether the city has sacrificed considerable revenue opportunities by entering into this public-private partnership for its parking meter system. In particular, the Alderman study finds that the city of Chicago is receiving significantly less revenue than it would have received if it had not entered into its long-term lease for its parking meter system and simply adopted the rate structure and improvements to be implemented under the agreement. Furthermore, the Alderman study found that, the Alderman study estimated that the city of Chicago is only receiving about 1/5 of the true value of the contract for this concession. So I'd be willing to share that study with you if you're interested.
Absolutely. Anything that you'd like to submit for the record, please do so.
Okay.
Also, you're talking about Alderman Scott
Wagisbach? It's W-A-G-U-E-S-P-A-C-K. Is that how you pronounce it?
How do you say it? Oh.
Yeah, I'm
Volkswagen.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Is there anybody here for public comment on item number 12? Seeing and hearing none. Public comment on item number 12 is now closed. With that is the recommendation of the chair of this committee that we approve the CAO recommendations 1 through 5 and also the request of the staff to confirm the key names of the individuals as part of the team of J.P. Morgan, Chase, Ramirez and Company, and Loop Capital, that they get that in writing from those firms so that we could continue to move forward. Okay? So that is the action of this committee on item number 12. Yes?
Excuse me, Chair. I just wanted to point out that we had also requested a substitute language for recommendation number 2, which I can provide to the
Okay.
to the clerk.
Yes. So it's a technical change, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So on recommendation number 2, that the recommendation be reflected in the record to the technical changes as submitted to this committee. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That concludes item number 12. So we will go back. What item were we on before we went to?
We were on item number 8.
Okay, we'll move down to item number 8.
Item number 8, General Services Department report relative to a request to issue a rent credit for a lease agreement with LA Spice LLC at 5651 West Manchester Avenue.
Okay. Is there anybody here to make comments on item number 8? Anybody here to make comments on item number 8? We are now open for public comment on item number 8. Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 8 is now closed. Is there any technical changes or anything? Okay. That being the case, it's the recommendation of the chair of this committee to approve the report for item number 8. We now move to item number 9.
Item number 9 we heard previously,
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
so we would be at item number 10,
Number 10.
Chair.
Okay, item number 10.
Item number 10, motion raised Perry relative to a proposed transfer jurisdiction of city-owned property located at 305 Patton Street to the Department of Recreation and Parks. This item is also referred to Arts, Parks, Health, and Aging Committee.
Okay. Anybody here from Rec and Parks on item number 10? Recreation and Parks, do you understand and feel comfortable assuming the responsibilities and maintenance for this facility?
Daryl Ford, Department of Recreation and Parks Planning and Construction Division, yes.
Okay, so you understand that. Okay, fine. We're on item number 10. Is there anybody else here for public comment on item number 10? Public comment on item number 10 is now open. Okay, it's now closed. With that, it is the recommendation of the chair that we adopt the motion. We now move to item number 11.
Item number 11, LADOT report relative to a proposed transfer of jurisdiction of city-owned property, the Santa Monica and Sepulveda Municipal Off-Street Parking Lot, lot number 748, located at 11010-11014, Santa Monica Boulevard, from the Department of Public Works to the LADOT. This item has also been referred to the Transportation Committee.
Okay. Is there anybody here to make public comment on item number 11? We're on item number 11. Public comment is now open on item number 11. Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 11 is now closed. Is there anybody from staff that needs to make comments about any technical changes or anything that needs to be changed regarding this recommendation? Seeing and hearing none. With that, the recommendation of the chair of this committee that we approve the DOT report. Okay, are there any other items on the agenda?
Nope, that's
Okay.
our agenda.
All right, therefore, we open up for general public comment to this committee. It is now open for general public comment to this committee. Seeing and hearing no one come forward for general public comment. General public comment is now closed. This committee is now adjourned.